Okay, does that look like what you're looking at, exhibit 261?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. An actual evidence bag. This is apparently what an evidence bag looks like. I note, for example, it does not say Stop and Shop on the side of it. Instead, it has, first of all, evidence tape that says evidence on it. And then it also has a bunch of writing on it for chain of custody purposes. As you can see at the bottom, it says chain of custody in bold letters. And then it has who submitted it and when and the time and what's in there and when it was located. Wow. Right? Actual evidence bag used by actual police in actual case. So they do know how to use an evidence bag. They just choose not to sometimes. Apparently with the solo cups. But if it's not solo cup related, maybe we'll use an actual evidence bag. Cool. Actual evidence bag. That's a nice touch.
You see Trooper Proctor's name on the evidence bag as the person that collected it.
Yes, that's correct.
And
Of course it's Proctor.
What's in the bag, and it shows both the orange t-shirt and the gray sweatshirt collected together and bagged together, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And
Okay. So we have two items in the same bag. An orange t-shirt and a gray sweatshirt, and we put them together in the same bag. So good news, we used an actual evidence bag. Bad news, we put two items in the same bag, leading to cross-contamination issues. Well, I suppose we got halfway. That was nice. We already had cross-contamination issues with the solo cups because they weren't sanitary. And, we didn't make any particular attempts to label them or anything. So I guess we're halfway there. Halfway is nice. We're using actual evidence bags, but still with the cross-contamination. Maybe one day the police will get all the things right at the same time. That will be a brilliant day for us all if that ever happens.
the debris that you ultimately got from the shirt or shirts, you don't know if that debris may have been in the bag and the shirts picked up the debris in the bag or otherwise, correct?
Correct.
Because they were housed together,
Yep.
Yes,
stored together.
that's
Yep.
correct.
Were you aware before you began your analysis on either one of those shirts that those shirts had been found at the bottom of an ambulance, on the floor of an ambulance at one point?
I don't have any knowledge of where the clothing, what condition the clothing in was before I got it.
Okay, and that probably...
Yeah, again, not necessarily ideal. Where did the thing came from might be helpful information, but sadly, I had no idea. It was just evidence came from somewhere that's in a bag. I have no idea exactly where it came from. Not that that would be important in any way for chain of custody purposes, where it was located or when, under what circumstances. If it was located on the floor of an ambulance, maybe there were other cross contaminants from other people who used the ambulance at some point, potentially. Or, people walking in and out of the ambulance, people trudging things on their shoes into the ambulance. Who knows what's at the bottom of this ambulance? But that might be important information, but not documented in any way, apparently. No reason to tell the lab that, I guess. They'll figure it out.
One of the things that you did indicate was, in your direct examination, was how important it is to maintain sanitary conditions with evidence to avoid contamination, correct?
That's correct.
For instance, you wouldn't want to take the swabs that you so carefully utilize to swab an item of evidence and then, drop it on the floor. You would have to discard that item and then start over, correct?
If a swab is dropped on the floor, we don't discard it. We would preserve it, but that would be a note that we would have to put in our file, and that, yes, that swab would not be tested any further.
Right, because of the possibility of cross-contamination.
Correct.
Yeah, once again, the lab just speaking some basic truths here. You want to be cautious about anything that might lead to cross-contamination because you want to make sure the sample depicts what the sample is supposed to depict. And if you don't know that, then yeah, and the evidence wasn't exactly given to you in the best example so that you could avoid cross-contamination issues, like a sane person would.
At least according to the evidence bag, those two shirts were in the custody and control of which trooper before you got them?
Trooper Proctor collected the evidence, according
Of course
to
he
the
did.
bag.
Thank you.
Of course he did.
Ms. Hartnett, before you received all of the items that we've talked about and all the items that you've testified about, with the exception of the items that you physically took with you from the Sally Port, everything else that you've testified to was submitted to you on March 14th or after, correct?
That's correct.
And all submitted by Trooper Proctor, correct?
I know they were all submitted by the Norfolk County Detective Unit. I don't know the specific officer that necessarily dropped them off at the lab. Okay.
Based on the log information that you have, in other words, the chain of custody that's in front of you, that you can absolutely look at and determine where things were and who had them, can you tell us whether or not Trooper Proctor or anybody else stored any of the taillight material and the clothing in the same place or even in the same bag?
No, I don't have any information to how the evidence was treated before it was received in the lab.
In fact, that's because there is no chain of custody for that data. I'm sorry, for those items. There's no data for those items predating March 14th, correct?
Yep.
Objection.
Sustained.
Yep.
You don't personally have any chain of custody information about those items we just went over predating March 14th, do you?
I personally do not have any data that would indicate where those items of evidence were prior to them being accepted into the lab.
And one of
So yeah, we have a huge chain of evidence problem. So according to this woman, she collected evidence from the vehicle itself on March 1st, which was when the police had access to the car. But basically everything else, every other piece of evidence other than what she personally got from the car, the clothing, anything else that was retrieved, wasn't turned into the lab until March 14th, which I don't know how good you are about your calendars, but the difference between the difference between February 1st and March 14th is 6 weeks. It's a month and a half. A month and a half in which this evidence is somewhere. And the lab has absolutely no idea where, because they have no chain of custody records about the evidence that was given to them for the month and a half that it was held by somebody before it was given to the lab, at a time in which the evidence could have been manipulated or tainted, or could have otherwise been destroyed or changed, even inadvertently, perhaps through the cross-contamination, for example, by being kept in a different bag or whatever. But the lab has no idea because they have no chain of custody of the evidence for a month and a half in which chain and custody is missing. The most basic of basic police procedures are routinely not followed in this case. What the heck is going on?